is a owner of a small commercial construction business, and Jordan, one of his best employees, wasn't acting like himself. Jordan was normally very energetic, talkative, thoughtful, confident, and really diligent in getting his work done and taking ownership over his work for that small commercial construction company. But for a few days, Jordan wasn't acting like himself. He wasn't very talkative. He wasn't very energetic. And although he was getting his work done, he wasn't as efficient as possible. So Will asked a few of the other people on his crew what was up with Jordan, and nobody knew. And so Will, as many of us do, he started speculating. He was wondering, did someone make Jordan mad? Was he disgruntled? Was he upset about his pay? Was he having personal issues? And Will's speculation was causing him to think negative towards Jordan. And so he decided to get rid of the speculation and go right to Jordan, the source. And Will had some errands he had to run, so he asked Jordan to go with him, and they got in the car, and Will just asked him, hey, what's going on? You haven't been acting like yourself. And Jordan started to explain to him how he's having some issues at home, and how these things were keeping him from thinking clearly and being his best and having the motivation that he needed to do his job effectively. And Will took his time. He really listened to Jordan. He wanted to make sure that he felt heard. He allowed him to finish talking. He didn't interrupt him at all. He used every ounce of his empathy to dive into Jordan's shoes to really understand what he was going through. And at the end of the conversation, Will looked at Jordan. He said, listen, do you need some time off? I want to make sure that you are taking good care of yourself. You're taking care of your issues. Your job will be here when you get back. But if you need some time off, go ahead and take it. And Jordan was so appreciative that Will took the time to take him with him. He noticed that there was something up, and he asked him about it. And after that, Jordan had felt a lot better. And he said he didn't need time off. He thought the best thing for him was to continue working and being around the guys and being around Will. And he was back to his normal self the next day. And, you hear this situation. It's a real scenario. And you might ask yourself, what was the cause? What was the dramatic change that had happened? And the dramatic change was emotional intelligence, or commonly used in abbreviation as EQ. Hi, I'm Michael Ross, and I'm the principal and founder of HBK's High Performance Division. And for the past 15 years, we've been helping small business owner, operator, entrepreneurs build strong cultures through practicing the characteristics of emotional intelligence, which we'll be discussing today. Now, emotional intelligence is simply the ability to perceive, to understand, to use, to manage, and handle emotions in a way that relieves stress, helps you communicate effectively, empathize with others, and overcome challenges to diffuse conflict. To be an effective leader, you have got to constantly be improving your emotional intelligence, because you're going to be forced into a lot of situations where you're going to have to perceive, understand, and properly manage the emotions of a group and not just yourself. And you've got to remember that human beings are emotional creatures. We make emotional decisions. We make in business emotional buying decisions. We buy, sell, and trade oftentimes through a gut feel, intuition, or emotion. And when it comes to building a strong culture, emotion connected with a unified purpose and vision is one of the most powerful forces in the world. And this is why companies are looking for people with high emotional intelligence, or EQ, over people with a high intelligence quotient, which is IQ. In fact, there was a study done that involved over 2,600 hiring managers. And in the study, 71% of these hiring managers said that they look for EQ over IQ. And when they were asked why they do that, here's some of the answers they gave. They said that high EQ employees are better at staying calm under pressure. Now, all of us know how important that is. They said that high emotional intelligence employees listen as often or more often than they speak, meaning they're aware enough and they're mindful enough to take in the information that they need to hear in order to contribute back to the whole. Another thing is they lead by example. They make more thoughtful business decisions. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. They take criticism well, and they admit their mistakes and learn from them. They take personal responsibility and are not afraid to admit their mistakes. They're more comfortable in their own skin. They keep their emotions in check and can discuss tough, sensitive issues thoughtfully and maturely. How valuable is that? If you just sit and think about that one for a second, to be able to talk about tough and challenging issues maturely, that is such a high value to us, because in business, oftentimes there are tough, challenging issues that come up. And if we have people who are defensive, constantly passing blame, deflecting, it's going to be difficult to come up with good solutions. Another thing about emotionally intelligent people is they can effectively resolve their own conflict. They can have the courageous conversations that they need. And without people who can properly manage conflict or resolve conflict, you're going to have disunity on your team. To keep a culture unified, everybody has to be able to resolve conflict on their own. There are times where you have to do it as a group, but people have to have the courage and the skill to be able to resolve conflict on their own. And emotionally intelligent people can do that. And then finally, emotionally intelligent people are empathetic to coworkers and they react accordingly. And again, unity, trust is so important to making sure that you have a strong culture that is growing and thriving. And remember that a culture is a bunch of people working together under the same values towards the same end and from the same purpose. So we've got to get people who can work together, who have greater emotional intelligence, to be able to identify who they are, how they fit in this construct, which is your business, and then be able to connect to others and be able to read the emotions of the room. The greater your emotional intelligence and the greater ability you're going to have to connect to others, it'll also help you build your network, which is very important to the growth of your business. Success experts have shown that people with the fastest growing businesses have the biggest networks and are able to connect with people at a very high level. Another thing that emotional intelligence is going to help you do is help you handle challenging clients. We all run into challenging clients. And as I've mentioned on previous webinars, you want to take every adversity and turn it into opportunity. So when you handle challenging clients, you want to be able to think to yourself, how can I turn this garbage into gold? And emotional intelligence will help you do that. You also, through emotional intelligence, can keep yourself working and living with a purpose and for a purpose. When you're emotionally intelligent, you're able to be more aware of what is going on around you internally and socially and what is going on in your organization. And it'll also help you be more mindful of why you're doing what you're doing in the first place and how to make sure that you are maintaining the direction to live your purpose. And then finally, increasing your emotional intelligence is going to help you connect with yourself. Christina Baldwin, who's a Afro-noted author, once said that life is a journey through your interior. The better we get to know ourselves, the more fulfilled we will be, the more confident as a person that we will be, and the more we can surrender to our natural gifts which impact the world. There are no cookie cutter people in the world. We're all unique. Emotional intelligence is going to help you become clear about your uniqueness and your extraordinary gifts. So in our remaining time together, I want to first talk through the 5 characteristics of emotional intelligence to give a little detail on each. And then I want to talk to you about 3 ways that you can begin to improve your emotional intelligence starting today. So let's start by talking about the 5 characteristics of emotional intelligence. And the first one is self-awareness. So what this is about knowing yourself. It's about being clear about your wants, your needs, your desires. It's knowing and understanding your passions. What is it that fills your personal cup? What is it that gets your juices flowing? What is it that stirs your heart? It's also knowing your skills. What are you actually good at? You know, I oftentimes I think I'm better at certain things than what I am, and I also don't think I'm as good at certain things than I really am. And when I sit back and I really evaluate myself and I become more self-aware, I can look at some of the results I've had. I can look at some of the skills that I have and evaluate what I'm really good at, what I may think I'm good at that I'm not so good at. But what's important is that I have clarity on what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and my passions so that I can use those things to positively impact the world. Another thing we have to be clear on is what we're weak in, the areas we're weak in. This isn't to shame, guilt, or judge ourselves. I love the old proverb that says this: your strength is made perfect in weakness. When you're willing and able to admit your weaknesses, you actually give people who are strong in your area of weakness an opportunity to come to the forefront and resolve an issue. So if you're not very strong in an area, I am not a great financial manager, which makes a CPA firm as my parent company a great fit for me because they are great financial managers and I've learned a lot working with them. But I'm not a great financial manager. It is a weak area of mine. And so by admitting that and surrendering to the advice of those who are strong in that area, I strengthen my business. So being clear about your weaknesses and being willing to admit that will help you and your organization become stronger. But you must be self-aware and you must have an honest conversation about the areas you're weak in and be vulnerable and willing to admit it. And then finally, self-awareness is about identifying emotions as they arise and discerning the cause of them. This can get very, very deep. I've done a lot of internal work when it comes to self-awareness. Gone clear back to my childhood with certain emotions. But there are times, there are triggers that occur for all of us that cause emotions to stir within us that oftentimes, unless you go back and dig to the source of that, it goes unnoticed, and then we're not able to properly discern how to manage them. I challenge all of you to become more self-aware, and as emotions arise in you that cause you to react as not yourself, I would ask you to sit with that emotion for a minute, realize that emotions are like clouds, they're not anchors, they will pass, but to take time to study that and say, you know, where is this coming from? Why do I feel the way I do? Maybe a person makes you feel off because that person reminds you of somebody from your past who did wrong by you. You've got to be able to recognize that if you're going to be more self-aware and if you're going to become the best leader that you can. So number one, self-awareness. There's a lot of work that we all have to do in this area so that we can be the most emotionally intelligent person that we can be. Number one, self-awareness. Number two is self-regulation. Now, self-regulation is our ability to regulate our emotions, especially in crisis. The best leaders can regulate their emotion as they work through a crisis. Yet, They are also to re-engage with their emotion once the crisis is averted. Self-regulation is most often discussed in crisis, yet self-regulation should be evaluated in all manners of interaction. And here's what I mean by that. We really notice people's self-regulation in crisis. Now, this is something I learned in the military. They talk all the time about when things go awry. We have got to make sure that the first thing we do is that we lower our cortisol levels, we still our minds, and we remain calm. And so we talk a lot about this in crisis. We talk a lot about self-regulation in crisis situations. And oftentimes there are judgy sayings that are given out. Hey, keep yourself calm, cool down. Okay, hey, check your emotions at the door right now. Hey, we don't need that right now, so calm down. Now, there are times for us to still our emotions, especially in a leadership situation, a crisis leadership situation. It's important that you validate people's emotions and you ask them for a period of time to focus on the task at hand to get it done. But it is important that after the crisis is averted, that you are able to re-engage and say, okay, hey, let's talk about this situation. How are you feeling? And how can we make sure that A, we don't allow this kind of crisis to happen again, but B, in a crisis situation next time, what is the best way to handle this? How should we communicate to one another? How can we get the best results? So self-regulation, yes, we value it in times of crisis, but we need to constantly be talking about self-regulation because our emotions come up constantly. Our emotions are constantly swirling around, and we need to be able to regulate and channel them in the proper direction. It's very, very important that we learn the art of self-regulation as leaders so that we can manage our own, we can regulate our own, but we can also help guide and direct people to regulate their own. And we cannot use guilt, shame, or judgment to do that. That will not work on a long-term scale. You have got to take the time to really validate people's emotions and also be vulnerable about your own if you're going to connect at a high level and really teach the art of self-regulation. So the number one characteristic, self-awareness. Number two, self-regulation. Number three is motivation. And this is being aware of what motivates you. According to research, there are 3 intrinsic and 3 extrinsic motivators. I talk about them often because they are very important to leadership and building a strong culture. The 3 extrinsic motivators, which are positive: money, prestige or fame, and power. Money, fame, power. Those are extrinsic motivators. Now, extrinsic motivators, they don't have a long wick to them. They can motivate you in the short term, but they don't have sustainable energy to them. The 3 intrinsic motivators have endless wicks to them. They will always motivate if given the ability and the space to do so. The 3 intrinsic motivators are: everyone wants to make personal progress, to get better, to improve, to grow, and to thrive. That's number 1. Number 2 is people want to be connected in meaningful relationships. They want to be connected in meaningful relationships with people who care about them equally. Okay, so that is very important to us as human beings. And then number 3, which is the greatest intrinsic motivator of all, is that everyone wants to belong and contribute to a purpose bigger than self. We want to know that the work we're doing, that the life we are living is having meaning, that is affecting and impacting the world for positive change. So within those 3 intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, what we have to do to create greater emotional intelligence is we have to identify which ones motivate us most. Some people are more motivated by money than they are fame or prestige. And some people are more motivated by power than they are money. Some people are more motivated by fame than they are money or power. And the other side of things too, Some people are more motivated by connection and relationships than they are personal progress and so forth and so on. What you need to do is identify for yourself what is it in those three intrinsic and extrinsic motivators that are most valuable to you. Be very clear. Be very, very clear about that. Because I know for me, I am so inspired and motivated about thinking about inspiring others to live their best life, to have a fulfilled and impactful life, to be intentional, to be exceptional and lead. I don't want people to look back on their life with regret. So having a purpose bigger than self is very important to me, but you have one that is very important to you. And it's important for your emotional intelligence that you're aware of what that is. And as a leader, it's important that you also help your team identify what motivates them and that you utilize that in inspiring them to be the best that they can be. So number one, characteristic of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Number two, self-regulation. Number three, motivation. Number four is empathy. This is very important. It's the ancient art of consideration. It's considering others in mind and emotion as you communicate with them. It's also considering others when you're making decisions. Leadership decisions deeply impact the lives of others, both personally and professionally. And it's vital that we continually develop empathy as we lead. We have got to take time to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Think to yourself, if I make this decision, what are the long-term and short-term impacts of the decision that I'm making? It is important that in emotional intelligence, you slow yourself down when making certain decisions. Do not be hasty. So, number one, self-awareness. Number two, self-regulation. Number three, motivation. Number four, empathy. And number five is social skill. This is your ability to manage relationships and develop new relationships. These are the social graces. This is your ability to walk into a room with someone you've never seen before and to be able to connect with them and develop a relationship with them. This includes your character, so who you are as a person, your integrity, your communication skills, and then your manners, how you speak to people, the way you look at them in the eyes, the way you shake hands, the way you give greetings and goodbyes. It all matters in your manners. And those social graces will give you greater platforms. The better you are in social graces, the more networks you're going to be invited into. So without continually developing your social skills, you're going to falter as a leader, because ultimately the job of a leader is to put people in the best position to succeed, both individually and as a group. So you're in the people business. Social skills such as communication is the number one skill of a leader. You've got to be improving this all the time. It's got to be an obsession, borderline obsession for you to improve your communication skills so that you can connect with others at a higher level. And you must always be looking to improve in your manners and in your character. So ultimately, your growth as a leader will be linked to your ability to grow in the five characteristics of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. Now, let's talk about three ways that you can begin to improve EQ starting today. Number one is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to connect with what is going on inside yourself. It's asking yourself what's going on and being able to give yourself a good answer. It's helpful in helping you become more socially aware. Why? Because mindfulness requires this, that you slow down and you integrate your mind, your body, and your emotions as one, especially in context of whatever your current situation is. So for example, let's say that you're working on a client project and it's not going well. We've all had situations like this. We've all had them recently. We're going to run into this again in the near future. you're behind in time, scope, and you're losing money. You're feeling emotionally displaced. You're starting to get frustrated. And the tendency is, as human beings, this is our first tendency. It's the way our minds are built. Okay. The tendency is to start to blame someone or something and have the thought off with their heads. I used the story earlier about Will. Will's first tendency, when knowing that Jordan was going through a tough time and he saw he wasn't working as efficiently as he could, his first thought was, or there must be something wrong. He must be, upset with us. There must be something wrong with his pay. He automatically started assuming negatively, and that happens to us as human beings. It's not something we fight. That's something we have to become more mindful of and know that is going to happen. So instead of placing blame, what we've got to do is we've got to tell our minds to stop, especially because your mind immediately is also going to say, okay, we need to rectify this situation now. We need to get moving. We need to do what's right. We need to figure it out. And your mind's going to tell you to go 100 miles an hour, work longer hours, squeeze hard until you catch up. But in these situations, as averse as this might feel to your body, you need to practice mindfulness. And it's perfectly normal for stressful situations to cause stress. Duh, right? I mean, Captain Obvious. But just like a fire can't put out fire, stress cannot put out stress. Peace eliminates stress. So additionally, a scientific fact is that relaxed muscles react faster and relaxed minds are better problem solvers. So to practice mindfulness, you need to use different tools. You can use things such as guided meditations. You can go for a walk. You can practice gratitude by saying 5 things you're grateful for, which will put you in a state of appreciation, which will help clarify your mind. You can sit in silence for a while, just taking deep, calculated breaths and become aware and present of what is going on in the moment, because oftentimes the things that we think are massive deals, when we eliminate all the stress and the white noise around it, it doesn't seem as big. So just stopping and doing a few exercises that can help you become more present and mindful will reduce stress, get you into a state of appreciation where you can think clear and make better decisions. And I know for some of you, you may think that this is totally against what your mind has done and what you've done reactively. But if we don't do something different, if we do not change what we do, we're going to get the same thing that we've always gotten. And I know many leaders want to work themselves out of a job. They want their people in situations like this to handle the crisis, and they don't want to have to dive in and deal with it. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you practice mindfulness, that you use peace to drive out stress, and you train your team how to do this so that people can make better decisions and live with less regret. So here's the other thing about being mindful. When you're in stressful situations and you become more mindful and you take time, it increases the likeliness that you're going to treat other people with more respect and honor. Most of the time, at least in crisis situations I've been a part of, or conflict situations that I've been a part of, people lash out when they're stressed and things are cluttering their mind. So a lot of the times when I'm brought into a situation to do conflict resolution, it's because somebody was stressed and they said something demeaning or disrespectful to somebody else. And that's simply because somebody was acting out of haste. And there's an old proverb that says this: do you see a person who speaks out of haste? There is more hope for a fool than for them. So we have to seek mindfulness, even when our body, mind, and emotion are screaming for us to eliminate stress through stress. And when you do that, you're also going to have the internal fortitude to treat others with honor and respect in crisis situations, which, again, in a culture, nothing is more important than you maintaining trust with people, and you can only do that through honor and respect. So first way to increase your emotional intelligence is be more mindful. Be more mindful of what is going on around you. Number two is to develop a new discipline. Develop a new discipline. Now, this is going to help you with your self-regulation. It also will help you with your internal motivation because, again, intrinsic motivation, making personal progress, connecting with others in relationships. You can utilize a new discipline to connect with someone else. And here's what's great about the developing of a new discipline is you've got to retrain your subconscious mind, which is very, very difficult. So you've got to form a new pattern in your mind because your mind, it acts like a new pathway in the woods, for example. If you've ever forged a new pathway in the woods, you know that at first there's all this brush and there could be briars, there could be old logs in the way and sticks, and you've got to clear the pathway out in order to forge a new path. Well, that's how new disciplines act in our subconscious mind. We have to get used to doing these new disciplines over and over again, and it can be very difficult. But at the same time, when you're developing a new discipline, you're also eliminating a discipline or a lack of discipline that is harming you. For example, very easy one is when you decide you're going to start eating healthier. Well, you're saying yes to being healthy and eating healthy foods. You're also saying no to eating unhealthy foods. So you're eliminating a lack of discipline with unhealthy foods, and you're saying yes to developing a discipline of eating healthy foods, which is good. So developing a new discipline helps you retrain your subconscious mind, helps you with self-regulation, helps you with motivation. And then by proactively doing this, you also are building your character. You're becoming more intentional as a person, which is essential to becoming a great leader, is being intentional about discipline. And then it also helps you build confidence. And what I always suggest is when you're developing a new discipline, grab an accountability partner, especially inside your organization, to connect with them so you can share empathy with one another. And that person can also benefit from you practicing the discipline of self-regulation in a certain area of your life. It's going to help you connect at a higher level. So get an accountability partner, somebody that's going to help you with this and develop the muscles of self-regulation and discipline in your life. Here's some examples of things you can do to start practicing self-regulation. How about this? Limit your cell phone usage each week. There's something on certain phones where they can tell you how much time that you spend on your phone. And most people spend about 7 hours a day surfing or messing around on their phone. So what you can do is start to regulate the time that you spend on your phone. It can be hard because it's so easy to pick up your phone and mess around. That may be one for you. You could exercise 4 days a week or more and find some balance in your life and exercise and eating healthily, because that's a big challenge for all of us. And then here's another one that I always recommend. Spend time focusing and being more aware on the things that you say. Most people live in a state of perpetual negativity and they don't even know it. So here's a challenge. Make sure that you discipline yourself not to say anything that makes you powerless. Okay? So anything that you say that is blaming, it would be, complaining, deflecting, or excuses. Don't say them. And regulate the words that come out of your mouth, because if you speak powerfully, you'll begin to act powerfully, because out of the abundance of our heart, our mouth speaks. Whatever we believe about ourselves, we start to we say, and most of the time we do it subconsciously. So what I'd ask you to do is pay attention to what comes out of your mouth, the conversations you're having, and if you're saying something that makes you powerless, that has to do with blame, complaining, deflecting, or excuses, I would ask you to regulate yourself and to work on eliminating the belief behind those powerless words that you're using. So that's a few examples. I would ask you to take one of them and start working on that. So number one, I'd ask you to be more mindful. Number two is develop a new discipline. Number three is listen intently. Listen intently. When people are speaking to you, slow your mind down and focus on putting yourself in their shoes. Try to feel what they're feeling and pay attention to their body language and tone, and try to use the mirroring principle and mirror their body language and tone. And when you do that, people feel more connected to you. It's called the mirroring principle. So pay attention to the little details of what they say and how they say it. Repeat back to them, hey, here's what I hear you saying. Just so they feel understood, they feel like you're completely tracking with them. Ask follow-up questions, validate them. Seek to connect with them emotionally and not just intellectually. This is going to strengthen your empathy muscles. And some people are more naturally empathetic than others, but empathy is a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets. Empathy is a practical way of telling your team that they are the most important asset to your organization. Listening intently, especially when you have a task list a mile long, as we all do, sitting on our desk. When you have a task list a mile long, it can be very hard to regulate your mind and use empathy. But when you do this, you will benefit your culture, because you as the leader are telling them through your facial expressions, through your questions, through your mirroring, that they are the most important asset to your organization. And they're going to feel it and they're going to appreciate it. So number one, practice you can do is mindfulness. Number two is develop a new discipline. Number three is listen intently. Now, EQ is developed through consistent, intentional disciplines. It will only grow as you exercise it. And as we come to a close, topics like this, like emotional intelligence, can leave all of us feeling a bit emotionally displaced. It's easy to look back on our history and judge ourselves for the mistakes we've made, especially with emotional intelligence, because it does have such an effect on other human beings. But what's important now is what you are going to do with the information you've been given today. I want to help you intentionally infuse and weave the characteristics of emotional intelligence into your culture. So this is why I'm offering a no obligation 30-minute consultation to discuss how you can create a culture where people feel valued, they're passionate, and they're ready to contribute. These emotional intelligence characteristics are skills, okay? And you may not be great at them right now, which is why it is so important that you take me up on this offer, because once you start to infuse these practices of emotional intelligence, you are going to see benefits not only to your top and bottom line, but you're going to feel more fulfilled and impactful in the work that you're doing. And that's why high performance exists. We exist because we want to see every leader not only make a huge impact, but be fulfilled in what they are doing. None of us are going to look back on our life and say, man, I wish I'd have made one more dollar, one more buck. No, we're going to look back and we're going to look at the relationships that we built, the impact we made in the lives of others, and we're going to remember the testimonials that people gave us where they said, if it wasn't for you, I would not be me. And there is nothing more powerful than hearing a testimonial and making an impact like that. And that's what my joy is to help put you in a position to do that. So please sign up for your 30-minute consultation, and we'll talk about how to do that today. So I look forward to connecting with you. And as always, I want to encourage you to be intentional, be exceptional, and lead.